Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, Earthlings on planet Earth, wherever you are. I hope you're having a fabulous day. This video is all about Gibraltar. So if you're not interested in Gibraltar, there will be a tiny mention of the Queen because it does involve sovereignty. And there's been an argument over the Rock of Gibraltar now for at least 300 years between Spain and the United Kingdom. Because quite a few of you had asked, was that thing that was going on the border yesterday, that was extraordinary. In 10 years, I have never, ever seen the pedestrians backed up so far. There's like a car lane, a dedicated car lane if you're driving into Gibraltar. That's not what pedestrians use normally, but because the queue was so long, it was about half a mile long. They actually made the people queue round with the cars as well. It's unheard of, absolutely unheard of. And one of you commented and said it's a bit like the days of the Great Siege. And yes, and it's been going on for years, but not to that extent. And I do believe that was planned and intentional for the Easter weekend to deliberately ruin everybody's weekend. It's something, us that live here, we're used to it. Not quite to that extent, but goodness me, goodness gracious me. Oh, it's a bit bright there. It's like God sitting in my living room, isn't it? I'll move. Oh, that's a bit better. There we go. It's because I've got a bright light coming at me from all angles. I'll try and find a better spot. So yeah, to keep it fairly recent history, I'm doing my Mrs. Mop thing again today, cleaning again. Ready for the next people tomorrow. Yeah, if I take it to Franco, General Franco was the dictator that was ruling Spain. The border was shut for 13 years. And they did it quite unexpectedly. They just did it overnight. The Spanish lay claim to the rock. They say that's Spanish, and the British say no, we want it fair and square in a war. And there's the Treaty of Utrecht and stuff you can look up if you really wanted to go into it. But the long and the short of it is, it's a political thing. The actual people who live here and live in Gibraltar, a lot of them are related. And this town really sprang up because of Gibraltar and British occupation. It was just a really tiny fishing village where we live. And when Franco decided to close the border, some people were caught on the wrong side. They'd gone to visit friends or family, or they'd gone fishing. They had no idea it was going to happen, and vice versa. Some people who lived this side of the border were trapped inside Gibraltar, and it was just closed. I believe people could sneak in and out if they knew the right Guardia Civil officers. I've got a friend who lived down here during the days that they had the border closed, but really, effectively, the citizens of Gibraltar were under lock and key for 13 years. That's terrible, isn't it? Anyway, it wasn't the European Union then, and it's really nothing to do with Brexit. Brexit's, exacerbates it a little bit, but this has been going on for years. That they formed this thing, and it wasn't called the European Union. I think it was called the Common Market or something like that, where the founding member states decided they'd get some sort of trade deal going. And Spain was desperate to join. And when Franco died, the European, let's just call it the European Union, because I can't remember what the name of it was, but I'm certain a lot of you will remember. The European members group said you can't join unless you do this, this, this and this. And one of the stipulations was you must open the border to Gibraltar. And because Spain was so desperate to join, they agreed and they opened the border. And it's a pretty fluid border. There are 3 ways to get into Gibraltar. You can fly in by aeroplane, they have a runway. You can arrive by ship, ocean liner or sailing boat, or you can cross the land frontier, which is what we do. And some of you said, why don't we just live in Gibraltar? Gibraltar is a rock that's 3 miles long, and it's extremely expensive to live that side of the border. And not only that, I find it quite claustrophobic personally. We used to live in Gibraltar, and it's a lot of the people, Gibraltarians, they love to come out to Spain at the weekend. A lot of them have villas this side of the border, or they have caravans and they go camping. And the Spanish know this, the authorities, not the Spanish people. There's certain political parties that are stronger in Spain than others against it. Some of them say, well, it's British, and others say, no, it's Spanish. And the Queen visited Gibraltar once, and they went absolutely mental. So badly so that she never visited again. She felt she couldn't. It was the one place on planet Earth she felt she could not visit. Isn't that extraordinary? And yet, it's British, and Her Majesty was the monarch of the Rock of Gibraltar. But to avoid political arguments, she just didn't go. I mean, that's how heated it can get. Prince Charles and Princess Diana visited on Britannia, where on their honeymoon they stopped off at Gibraltar, much to the delight of the Gibraltarians, who gave them a hugely warm welcome. And we've actually got a photograph of the original little dolphin safari boat right next to Britannia, which we have in pride of place on our website. And the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, as they are now known, Sophie and Edward, have visited Gibraltar on more than one occasion, much again to the delight of the Gibraltarian people, because the Gibraltarian people really always wanted the Queen to come and visit, but I think they largely understood that, you know, there'd be a huge kick-off if they did. In fact, the last time Sophie and Edward came to the Rock, the Spanish found out they were on a commercial British Airways flight. The flight was sent back to Heathrow. It had to sit on the tarmac for ages. Telephone calls were made down diplomats, until eventually, I think what they did in the end was they said Sophie and Edward have got off the plane, they're not going, and the Spanish gave them air clearance to land, and guess what? They were on the plane. I mean, it's so childish. It's so childish, isn't it? So what we have to do every day is we just walk from our marina into Gibraltar. And normally it's quite a normal border, but once in a while the political heat is turned up. The worst I remember was 2013, and the queues to get out of Gibraltar, because they do it both ways. Sometimes they make it hard to get in and others hard to get out, and sometimes both ways. 2013, there were actually people keeling over. St John's ambulance were going up and down the queues with water for elderly people, pregnant ladies, and people who were just not feeling well, because they decided to do it in August, which is the hottest month. And actually, they did it through the whole thing, because I remember the kids were in school and they would break up for holiday July and August. So they must have been doing it in the May and the June, because after we'd finished work, the queue went right back to the runway. So we would just sit at Eroski Cafe. They have a terrace on the roof, and the kids would do their homework, and we'd buy them dinner there for their tea, and we'd watch until the queue died down round about 8:30, 9 o'clock, and then we'd walk home to the boat, go to bed, and then go through the whole thing the next day again. And a lot of people say, you know, why live in Spain? Because Spain is a beautiful country. And it's, every time I come out there, I love Gibraltar, but every time I come out into Spain, I feel I can breathe. There's space. And I think that's how a lot of Gibraltarians feel at the weekends. They just want some space. And a lot of the people who are queuing in the queue are workers from Spain. There's not just us. They think there's about 10,000 registered Spanish workers that cross the border. We're called frontier workers. And we all cross the border. And so when these political heat is turned up, I often see plasterers, electricians, builders, and they're covered in dirt, and they're tired, and they're hungry, and I know they're on minimum wage, and they're queuing and thinking, please God, I just want to go home and have something to eat, get a shower. Why am I being punished because of an argument between Madrid and London? Which is, that's really the nub of it. And the politicians in Gibraltar, they do their very best to negotiate and make life as good as possible. We've got a very good chief minister. In my opinion, Fabian has really tried hard. But they don't very often cross the border because they live and work on the Rock. It's really us cross-frontier workers. It's also tourists. When the coaches come, all the tourists have to get off the coach. That's 55 people get off and they walk through while the coach drives through to be searched and stuff. And so there were all of those people as well, with children and elderly people and queuing. And it's just awful. It's absolutely awful, because the way I see it is politicians are elected as public servants to make life better for all of us. Not more difficult, not more expensive, to improve the quality of life for the citizens. And I know that the Chief Minister in Gibraltar does share that sentiment, because I've heard him say those exact words. He's actually said it's my job to make things better. So to add Brexit to the mix, which, as I say, it absolutely terrified everybody down this neck of the woods, because what we feared was that the only reason the Spanish agreed to open the border was because of joining the European members thing, that if the UK left, they'd go, well, then we're not going to be ordered by the European Union anymore because you won't be a member, we'll just close it. And we were all absolutely terrified of that, because if that border closed, it's game over for everybody down here, for everybody. And a lot of people say, well, why live down here anyway? Well, you got to live somewhere, haven't you? Everywhere has its problems, and we do accept the border and we live with it. But yesterday, that was absolutely unheard of. And I heard, I mean, it was all over social media apparently, which I don't do Facebook and all that and Twitter. But I heard from my friends, whoa, it's been all over the place, that the car queue went as far back as San Roque, which is about 4 miles away. And the queue goes past my boat in the marina, and the honking and the horns all day yesterday, poor people. It's terrible. It's really terrible. And it's not because it was Easter and they're short-staffed, because it's the police. It's the national police that are in charge of immigration on the border. And the police, like in any other country, they don't just get short-staffed over Easter. Far from it. They have plenty of staff. But what they'd done was they closed it down to one lane for the cars, and they were scanning each and every single person's passport, which can take up to 5 or 6 minutes per passport. There are 4 people in the car, do the maths. And they were also doing that on the foot crossing, because you can walk in, you can drive in, you can cycle in. Luckily, with motorbikes, it is a little bit quicker, and that's why Benji was able to come and get Graham. I'm largely this side of the border most of the time, and I usually do Sundays when it's quite quiet. But yes, it's a 300-year-old argument that's been going on, and it's such a shame. It really is. It's such a shame, because the actual people who suffer have absolutely no influence over the decision. I have no influence over any political decisions. Neither do the builders, the electricians, and the other people. And we're all on very similar wages, you know, pretty low, which is normal. That's normal for a place like Gibraltar. I come from Brighton, and it's the same there. Anywhere where it's an attractive place to live, generally speaking, housing is expensive and wages are low. It's a service area industry, and that's what we're all doing. We live off tourism and other service industries. And it's just one of those things. At the moment, they're trying to negotiate, and I think they probably will succeed eventually, but I don't know when, to get rid of the border. It'll go completely. They're going to try and turn Gibraltar into a common travel area, remove the border. It will be governed by something called SpaceX. I can't remember the name. Some immigration thing, and they'll move the borders to the airport and the port. So it'll be people who arrive by aeroplane, or people who arrive by ocean liner, who already go through certain process. So it hopefully shouldn't be too inconvenient for them. But for the rest of us, it'll be a free travel area, and we all long for that day, because the whole area will prosper. Spain particularly would prosper out of that deal. But unfortunately, that requires the agreement of the Gibraltar government, of the United Kingdom government, of the Spanish government, and of course of the European Union. And as far as I have heard or understood so far, the 3 governments of Britain, Spain and Gibraltar are all in full agreement, and what's holding it up is the European Union. They're the ones that are deciding if these 3 sovereign states, well, Gibraltar's not exactly a sovereign state, it's part of the UK, but there is self-governing. So it's the bureaucracy at the European Union, which is, ironically enough, holding it up. So that's a very, very short, quick, recent history. And to give an example, to rent a bedsit in Gibraltar, about £1,000 a month for one bedsit for one person, more or less. Look up the prices. To buy a 1-bedroom flat, I don't know, right now, $250,000, $500,000. I mean, it's crazy prices, crazy prices. Housing in Gibraltar is very, very difficult. This side of the border, Someone could rent perhaps a 4-bedroom house like this on the beach. I don't know, €1,000 a month, maybe. I don't know. I haven't looked at the prices lately because we're quite settled. So it just gives you some idea of the difficulties. And I really wish that the politicians that on whichever side begin to realise that the only people they're actually hurting are the poor people who are stuck in the queue. Anyway, thank you all very much for listening. I'm going to carry on having my tea. My towels have just finished and I'm going to put them in the lovely Spanish sunshine. Thank you very much for listening, as always, and I hope you're having a wonderful day.